The gunshot echoed through the chapel, and Ketch's scream tore from her throat as Minute J's body jerked backward. Blood bloomed across his white shirt like a crimson flower, and for one terrible moment, time stopped. But this story doesn't begin with an ending. It begins 3 weeks earlier, in a basement that smelled of fear and cheap perfume, where 15 girls stood in a line waiting to be sold like cattle. You're about to find out. But first, like this video and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end. Ketch's heart hammered against her ribs as the door opened and harsh light spilled down the concrete steps. Mrs. Kang, the shelter director with her perfectly coiffed hair and cold smile, descended first, followed by a man who made the air itself seem to freeze. He was tall, lean, dressed in all black, his face carved from marble and just as unforgiving. Minute J. Even the other girls seemed to shrink away from his presence, but Nkechi refused to look down. When his dark eyes met hers, something electric passed between them, something dangerous and inevitable. Her, he said, his voice deep and final as a judge's verdict. The one who dares to look at me. Mrs. Kang's fingers dug into Nkechi's arm as she pulled her aside. Father Choi wants you to report everything Minute J does. Every meeting, every phone call, every visitor. Your mother and sisters in Lagos. You want them safe, don't you? Nkechi's blood ran cold, but she nodded. What choice did she have? The drive to Gangnam was silent except for the purr of the expensive car's engine. Nkechi sat as far from Minute J as possible, watching Seoul's glittering lights blur past the tinted windows. She was 24 years old, had come to Korea chasing a dream of legitimate work, and instead found herself trapped in a nightmare. When they arrived at his compound, all glass and steel and impossible wealth, Director Park opened her door with barely concealed disdain. The rules are simple, Park said as they walked through marble halls. You obey. You submit. You never question. I don't think so, Nkechi said, her Nigerian accent thick with defiance. Park's eyes widened in shock, but before he could respond, Minute J appeared in the doorway of what looked like a study. Leave us, Minute J commanded, and Park disappeared like smoke. Minute J moved closer, and Nkechi felt her pulse quicken. He was 30, she'd heard, a crime lord who'd built an empire on fear and blood. He circled her slowly, a predator assessing prey. You belong to me now. I belong to myself, Nkechi shot back, even as her hands trembled. I'm not some toy you can break. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise. Intrigue. He stepped closer until she could smell his cologne, expensive and intoxicating. Everyone breaks eventually. Try me, she whispered, and suddenly the space between them crackled with tension so thick she could barely breathe. His hand came up, and she flinched, but he only tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her skin. 7 days, she said quickly, desperately. Give me 7 days to prepare myself. After that, I won't fight you. His eyes narrowed. You're negotiating with me? You, who have nothing. I have my dignity, Nkechi said, lifting her chin. And you clearly want more than a broken doll. So give me 7 days. For a long moment, he studied her face, and she wondered if she'd made a fatal mistake. Then his lips curved into something almost like a smile. 7 days. But on the 8th day, Nkechi, you're mine completely, body and soul. The way he said her name, with that slight Korean accent wrapped around the Igbo syllables, sent shivers down her spine. Before she could respond, he leaned in close, his lips nearly brushing her ear. And just so you know, I always keep what's mine. He left her in a bedroom that was larger than her entire family's house in Lagos, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Nkechi pressed her forehead against the cool glass and tried not to cry. She had 7 days to figure out how to survive this, 7 days before Minute J claimed her, 7 days to decide whether to betray him for Father Choi or risk her family's safety. That first night, she couldn't sleep. Every sound made her jump, expecting Minute J to change his mind and burst through the door. But he didn't come. Instead, around midnight, she heard footsteps in the hallway and held her breath. The footsteps stopped outside her door. Through the crack underneath, she could see his shadow, standing there, waiting. 1 minute. 2. Then he walked away. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that subscribe button and drop a like to support more content like this. Now, let's see what happens when these two collide again. Morning came too quickly. A knock at her door made her sit up, heart racing, but it was only a maid with breakfast. Korean food she didn't recognize, until she lifted the cover on one dish and gasped. Jollof rice. Perfect, authentic jollof rice with fried plantains and chicken. Her mother's recipe. How did he know? Mr. Minute researched your preferences, the maid said softly before leaving. Nkechi stared at the food, emotions warring inside her. This man who owned her, who terrified her, had taken the time to learn what she loved. It felt like a trap, but her stomach growled, and she ate anyway, tasting home in every bite. On the second day, Minute J summoned her to his office. Nkechi found him standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean that sounded like ice cracking. When he saw her, he ended the call abruptly. Sit, he commanded, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. She sat, spine straight, refusing to show fear. Tell me about Lagos, he said, pouring 2 glasses of something amber and expensive. He slid one across to her. Why do you care? Nkechi asked, not touching the drink. Because I own you for 7 days, and I want to know what I bought. His words were cruel, but his tone was almost curious. She wanted to throw the glass in his face, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, like she was a puzzle he needed to solve rather than property he'd acquired. I had 3 sisters, she began, her voice tight. A mother who sold everything to send me here for a better life. I was supposed to work in a hotel, send money home, maybe study. Instead, I ended up in that basement. She met his eyes. But you already know all this, don't you? Minute J took a long sip of his drink. I know facts. I want to know you. Why? The question burst from her lips. Why does it matter? In 5 days, you'll take what you want anyway. He stood abruptly, moved around the desk with predatory grace, and pulled her to her feet. Nkechi's breath caught as he backed her against the wall, his hands on either side of her head, caging her in. You think I'm a monster, he said, his face inches from hers. You're right. But even monsters have preferences, and I prefer my women willing. I'll never be willing, she whispered, but her body betrayed her, leaning slightly toward his heat. Liar, he breathed, and then his mouth was on hers, fierce and demanding and absolutely devastating. Nkechi's mind screamed at her to push him away, to fight, but her body had other ideas. She kissed him back with equal fury, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer even as she hated herself for it. The kiss tasted like whiskey and danger and something she couldn't name. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. 4 days left, he said roughly, then walked out, leaving her trembling against the wall. That night, Nkechi tried to escape. She'd noticed the locks on the windows were electronic, but the bathroom had an old-fashioned latch. She worked at it for hours with a hairpin until it gave way. The window opened onto a narrow ledge 3 stories up, but freedom was freedom. She'd barely gotten one leg out when strong hands grabbed her waist and hauled her back inside. Going somewhere. Minute J's voice was deadly calm. He'd caught her in nothing but a silk nightgown, and the way his eyes traveled over her body made her skin burn. I'm disappointed, Nkechi. We had an agreement. An agreement I never wanted, she spat, struggling in his grip. He pushed her against the wall, his body pinning hers, and she felt every hard line of him pressed against her. You want to leave so badly? Then go. I'll have Director Park drive you back to the shelter right now. His lips brushed her ear. But we both know what happens to girls who fail Mrs. Kang. And I wonder, how long before Father Choi makes good on his threats to your family? Nkechi froze. How do you know about that? Minute J's laugh was bitter. You think I don't know why you're really here? Father Choi has been trying to plant spies in my organization for years. You're just the latest. He released her suddenly, and she nearly fell. But here's what he doesn't know. I don't care. Spy all you want. Report everything. It won't save you from what's coming. What's coming? She asked, wrapping her arms around herself. Day 8, he said simply, and left her alone with her racing heart and confused emotions. The third day, he gave her the run of the mansion. Since you're so eager to explore, he said over breakfast. But my men are everywhere. Try to run again, and I'll lock you in that bedroom until our week is up. Nkechi spent the day wandering the vast estate, noting exits and security patterns, but also discovering unexpected things. A library filled with books in multiple languages, including Chinua Achebe and Chimamanda Adichie. A music room with instruments from around the world. A garden that seemed impossible in the middle of Seoul's urban sprawl. She found Minute J there in the evening, sitting on a bench, staring at nothing. My mother planted these roses, he said without looking at her, before my father killed her for daring to love something beautiful. Nkechi's breath caught. She sat beside him, careful to leave space between them. How old were you? 8. My brother was 12. His jaw clenched. Father Choi wasn't always a priest, you know. He was Minute Ho then, my older brother, the one who was supposed to protect me. Instead, our father used him in ways no child should be used, and I was too young to stop it. When I finally was old enough, I put a bullet in our father's head. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Nkechi's hand moved of its own accord, covering his. I'm sorry, she whispered. Minute J looked at their joined hands, then at her face, and something cracked in his carefully controlled expression. Don't be kind to me, Nkechi. It makes this harder. Makes what harder? She asked, but he was already pulling her into his lap, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that tasted like desperation and need. Quick question. Is Nkechi falling for Minute J or playing him? Does he know she's been spying? Drop your theories below, hit that like button, and subscribe. Because what happens at that BTS concert will shock you. She should have pushed him away, but instead Nkechi melted into Minute J's embrace, her fingers threading through his dark hair as the kiss deepened. His hands spanned her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for air, his forehead rested against hers. 3 days left, he murmured, his thumb tracing circles on her hip through the thin fabric of her dress. Tell me you feel this too. Tell me I'm not insane. You're insane, Nkechi whispered, but her lips found his again, softer this time, exploring. And so am I. She pulled back slightly, her dark eyes searching his face. But this doesn't change what you are, what you do. I know, he said, his voice rough with emotion. But maybe you could change me. The vulnerability in those words terrified her more than any threat he'd made. She climbed off his lap, smoothing her dress with shaking hands. I need air, space, something. Then let me give you something else, Minute J said, standing. Tomorrow night. There's a BTS concert at Olympic Stadium. Come with me. Nkechi stared at him in disbelief. You're asking me on a date? While I'm your prisoner? Call it what you want, he said, that dangerous almost smile playing on his lips. But I've seen the posters in your room at the shelter. I know you love them. So yes or no? Her heart hammered. It was manipulation, obviously, another way to confuse her, to make her complicit in her own captivity. But God help her, she wanted to go. Wanted one night of normalcy before whatever came on day 8. Yes, she breathed. That night, Mrs. Kang called. Nkechi answered the burner phone hidden in her drawer, her stomach churning with guilt. Well? Mrs. Kang's cold voice demanded. What have you learned? He has meetings with Japanese businessmen on Thursdays, Nkechi lied, making up details that sounded plausible. And he's planning to expand operations to WASN next month. She had no idea if any of it was true, and she didn't care. She was protecting Minute J, she realized with a start. Protecting the man who owned her. Father Choi wants more, Mrs. Kang pressed. He wants account numbers, shipping manifests, anything concrete. I'm working on it, Nkechi said and hung up before her voice could betray her. She sat on the bed, head in her hands, wondering when she'd crossed the line from victim to accomplice, from captive to something far more dangerous. A knock at her door made her jump. Minute J entered without waiting for permission, and the look on his face made her blood run cold. "Who are you talking to?" he asked quietly, too quietly. "No one," Nkechi lied, but he was already crossing the room, pulling her to her feet. "Don't lie to me," he said, his grip firm but not painful. "I heard you. I'm working on it." "Who, Nkechi?" She could have told him everything then, could have confessed about Father Choi's threats, about the spying, about all of it. Instead, she did something that surprised them both. She kissed him. Hard and desperate and full of all the confusion raging inside her. Minute J groaned against her mouth, his hands sliding up her back, pulling her flush against him. "You're trying to distract me," he murmured between kisses, even as he lifted her, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her to the bed. "Is it working?" Nkechi gasped as his lips found her neck, her collarbone, the sensitive spot behind her ear. "Too well," he admitted, laying her down gently, his body covering hers. But instead of taking what he could have taken, what he'd paid for, he just held her, his face buried in her hair. "2 days left, and then you're mine. But I want you to choose it, Nkechi. Choose me." She couldn't answer. Couldn't promise something she didn't understand herself. So she just held him back, and they fell asleep tangled together, both knowing this fragile peace couldn't last. The concert was everything she'd dreamed and more. Minute J had secured a private box, but Nkechi insisted on being in the crowd, feeling the energy, the music, the life. He stayed close, his hand never leaving hers, his eyes constantly scanning for threats even as she sang along to every word. During a slow song, he pulled her back against his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist, and for those 3 minutes, they were just two people swaying to music, not captor and captive, not criminal and victim. "Thank you," she whispered, turning in his arms to look up at him. The stadium lights caught his face, softening the harsh planes, and she saw him, really saw him, maybe for the first time. Not the monster or the crime lord, but just Minute J. Broken and dangerous and somehow beautiful. He kissed her there in the crowd, with thousands of people around them, and Nkechi kissed him back like she was drowning and he was air. When they broke apart, his eyes were dark with promise. "One more day," he said against her lips. "And then no more counting." But as they left the stadium, Nkechi saw him. A man in black, watching from the shadows. Father Choi. Their eyes met across the distance, and his expression promised violence. She stumbled, and Minute J caught her. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she lied again, but her mind was racing. She had to warn Minute J. Had to tell him everything before Father Choi made his move. But before she could speak, rough hands grabbed her from behind, yanking her away from Minute J's grip. A cloth covered her mouth and nose, chemical sweet and suffocating, and the world went dark. She woke in a basement that smelled familiar. The shelter. Father Choi stood over her, his priest's collar gleaming white in the dim light. "Hello, Nkechi," he said softly. "You've been a very bad spy," Father Choi said, circling her like a shark. Nkechi's head throbbed where she'd been hit, her hand zip-tied behind the chair. "Feeding us lies, protecting him. Did you really think I wouldn't know?" "Let me go," Nkechi demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. "Minute J will come for me." Father Choi laughed, the sound hollow and bitter. "I'm counting on it. My dear little brother has always had a weakness for saving broken things. It's what got our mother killed, you know. She tried to save me from our father, and look where that got her." "You're his brother." Nkechi's eyes widened. "You're using these girls to get to him? What kind of priest are you?" "The kind who understands that vengeance is righteous," Father Choi hissed, grabbing her chin roughly. "He killed our father. Left me to live with the shame, the memories, while he built an empire on blood money. Now I'll take everything from him, starting with you." Upstairs, glass shattered. Gunshots rang out, making Nkechi flinch. Father Choi smiled coldly. "Right on time." He pulled out a gun, pressing it to Nkechi's temple just as Minute J burst through the door, his own weapon raised. "Let her go, Minute Ho," Minute J said, using his brother's real name. Blood dripped from a cut above his eye, and fury radiated from every line of his body. Behind him, Director Park and a team of men secured the building. This is between us. She's innocent. Innocent. Father Choi laughed again. She chose you, brother. That makes her guilty. His finger tightened on the trigger, and everything happened at once. Minute J fired, the shot echoing through the chapel. Father Choi's gun went off too, and Ketchy screamed as Minute J staggered backward, blood blooming across his white shirt. But Father Choi fell first, clutching his chest, his eyes wide with shock. You shot me, he gasped. Your own brother. Minute J dropped to his knees beside him, and Ketchy saw tears streaming down his face even as he held pressure on the wound. You gave me no choice, Minute J choked out. I tried to save you. I killed him for you. Why wasn't that enough? Because you were always his favorite, Father Choi whispered, blood bubbling at his lips. Even when he touched me, hurt me, destroyed me, he looked at you with love. I needed you to feel what I felt. To lose everything like I did. His hand reached up, touching Minute J's face with surprising gentleness. But I see it now. You already lost everything. The day you pulled that trigger, you lost your soul. I'd do it again, Minute J said fiercely. To protect you. To protect anyone I love. Father Choi's eyes found Nketch's. Love her better than father loved us, he breathed, and then he was gone, the light fading from his eyes. Director Park cut Nketchi free, and she ran to Minute J, wrapping her arms around him from behind as he knelt there, holding his brother's body, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I'm sorry, she whispered into his hair. I'm so sorry. He turned in her arms, burying his face against her stomach, and she held him while he broke apart, this dangerous man who'd bought her, threatened her, kissed her, and somehow stolen her heart in 7 impossible days. The next hours passed in a blur. Police came, were paid off, disappeared. The girls from the shelter, all 15 of them, were loaded into vans, given money, documents, choices. Mrs. Kang was arrested by legitimate authorities Minute J had finally contacted. The building was seized. It was over. Back at the mansion, as dawn painted the sky pink and gold, Nketchi found Minute J on the roof garden, standing among his mother's roses. His shirt was still bloody, though the wound had been superficial, just a graze. She approached slowly, afraid he'd shatter if she moved too fast. It's day 8, he said without turning around. Our agreement is fulfilled. Nketchi's heart clenched. Is that what you want? For me to go? He finally looked at her, and the devastation in his eyes nearly brought her to her knees. I want you to choose, freely. Not because I bought you, not because you're afraid, not because you pity me, but because you want this. Want me. She crossed the distance between them, taking his face in her hands. You're right. I didn't choose you at first. I hated you, feared you. But somewhere between the jollof rice and the concert, between the kisses and the confessions, I stopped being your prisoner. She pressed her forehead to his. I choose you, Minute J. Every broken, dangerous, beautiful part of you. I choose this. His kiss was different this time. Not desperate or demanding or full of dark promises. It was tender, reverent, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. I'll spend the rest of my life earning that choice, he murmured against her lips. I'll dismantle everything, rebuild it clean. For you. Because of you. We'll do it together, Nketchi said, and kissed him again, deeper, letting her body show him what words couldn't express. They sank down among the roses, the sunrise warming their skin as they finally came together, not as owner and owned, but as equals choosing each other despite impossible odds. Months later, the mansion had transformed. Nketchi ran a foundation for trafficking survivors, her sisters safely relocated from Lagos. Minute J had gone legitimate, using his empire to fund rehabilitation centers across Korea. Father Choi's shelter had become a real safe house, properly run, properly funded. And every night, they found each other in that garden, among those roses, and remembered that love could bloom even in blood-soaked soil. If you made it to the end of this journey, Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your support means everything and helps us bring you more stories like this. Until next time, remember that even in darkness, there's always a choice.